Hello everyone, in this video we will learn some of the basic concepts that you need to know when you use DAX calculated columns or measures in Power BI. So, as for columns, first of all, basic mathematical calculations for columns do not require the usage of DAX functions. Let's move to Power BI to figure out what this means exactly. So over here we are using the sales table. And let's say that we would like to create a column that would show the gross profit by subtracting total cost from sales amount. Although it's a better practice to create this calculation using the query editor, as I have explained in the previous video, for demonstration purposes, we will create it using DAX. To figure out why it's a better practice, please review the previous video. So, to create this calculation, I would simply go to Column Tools and click on New Column. And I would call this new column Gross Profit. So, to make this calculation, I would first add sales amount to that calculation, then add the minus sign and write down the name of the other column I would like to subtract and hit enter. So although this column is calculated using DAX, I didn't need to use any function to create it. I simply needed to use the minus mathematical operation. Same thing for addition, multiplication, or division. In case I need to use any of these basic mathematical operations, I just need to use the signs provided on the keyboard without having to use any DAX function. As a last example, let's create another column that would show the total cost as a percentage of sales amount. So I would click on new column one more time, and I would call this new column total cost percentage, then add an equal sign. And personally I prefer to make all my calculations on a line that is different from the first line, just to be able to easily distinguish between the name of the column or the name of the measure and the actual calculation included within that column or within that measure. So to move to the second line, I would press Shift and Enter at the same time. So to make this calculation, I would write down total cost, and to make Power BI autocomplete for me, I would just select the function or the column I would like it to autocomplete, then I would press the tab button. Then I would add the division sign and write down sales amount. Again, to make Power BI autocomplete for me, I would press tab. Then I would finally click enter or hit enter to make Power BI evaluate that expression and return the result. So it has returned the result already. Of course, it doesn't look as a percentage, as I need to add the percentage sign from here, but the point is that we can create or we can calculate basic mathematical operations like addition, multiplication, division, and subtraction. We can calculate any of these calculations using DAX, using basic mathematical operations, and without the need to use a DAX function. Going back to the PowerPoint presentation, so the second point is that many types of columns, aggregations, do not require the usage of DAX functions. Let's see what I mean by that with an example. So going back to the Power BI report, let's go to the report view and add subcategory, the product subcategory column. To make it easier to view what we are doing, I will go to the focus mode. And next I would add sales amount. So as the sales amount is identified by Power BI as a numerical column, and it has the numerical sign next to it, that's the sign right over here next to the check mark, it's summarized by default or aggregated by default using the summation aggregation method, meaning that Power BI would sum the value of the sales amount for each product subcategory and return it right over here. But I do not always have to use the summation aggregation method to aggregate this column. So I could use, for example, minimum, maximum, or even average. If I click on this drop down sign next to the column name, I can choose from any of the aggregation methods listed right here. So instead of sum, which has a check mark next to it, if I choose average, it would return the average sales amount for each of these product subcategories. Again, if I click on this drop down and select minimum, it would return the minimum amount. So the point I'm trying to explain is that although I could make that same calculation of minimum, maximum, average, or even sum, although I could make it using a DAX measure, I could also make it by selecting the suitable aggregation method for my needs from this drop down over here. Now let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation to read the next point together. So the next few notes are about measures. So first of all, when we use measures, we need to consider the following. Even the most basic aggregations require the usage of functions. So for example, to figure out what that means exactly, let's go back to the Power BI report. So as I said a few seconds ago, I can create or make the same aggregation or the same calculation using a measure. But although over here to sum the sales amount, get its minimum value, maximum value, or even average value, I do not need to write any code at all. If I use a measure, I would have to write a code even for the most basic functions or the most basic calculations. So let me move this back to sum and try to make a measure or create a measure that would return the same value. So to create this measure, I need to go to Table Tools and select New Measure. The first thing I need to do is to provide a name for my measure. So I would just say, for example, sum of sales amount. And after adding an equal sign and hitting Shift Enter to move to the next line, I need to write a function. So let's try to write down sales to refer to the sales table and open bracket and write down sales amount. Oh, it doesn't autocomplete. What's wrong? Well, that moves us to the second note about measures. As we said a few seconds ago, we cannot use measures without using a function. So before sales, we need to use the sum function that says sum, which is the first one right over here in this list. So to autocomplete again, I would just press tab. Then I have the table name. So all I need to do is to close that function with a curly bracket and hit enter. Do you think it would work? I don't think so. Why? Because any aggregation function has to refer to a column, not just a table. So it has to refer to the specific column or to a specific column within that table. So I need to go back here and add bracket and choose one of the columns listed over here, or even write down even a little part of its name. Then Power BI would autocomplete its name for me. So if I press tab and hit enter, it would go through smoothly. Finally, I can add this measure to the table I've created earlier, and as you may notice, the values I have on the sales amount column are identical to the values I have on the sum of sales amount column. So I'm pretty sure that you are having a question popping up in your head right now, asking why would I need to use a measure if I can get exactly the same calculation without writing any code and without using a measure? Well, for basic mathematical calculations like sum or minimum or maximum, most probably you'd be better off if you use one of the aggregation methods provided over here on this list. But for more advanced calculations, you would need to use a measure. And for these more advanced calculations, basic mathematical functions like sum, minimum, maximum would be used as building blocks, so that when we use them in combination with more advanced functions, could help us to create the calculation we need. I'm pretty sure that the picture will become clearer to you on the next videos. Finally, it's nice to know that measures could be easily identified by the sign next to the measure name. So as you can see, as this is a measure, it has a calculator sign next to it, next to the check mark. Calculated columns also have their own signs. So if I remove this word here, you would see that the gross profit column we calculated earlier has a sign of its own to distinguish it from other columns on the table. And these are all the basic concepts we need to know about columns and measures. See you in the next video. If you like this type of content, subscribe to our channel, hit like, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And by the way, we also offer Power BI consulting and training services at www.powerbimaster.com. See you in the next video.